Hi, and welcome to another episode of SWITCHCast, a podcast delving into the world of film brought to you by the team at Switch. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Charlie David Page.
I'm Jess Benton.
I'm Daniel Lamon.
And I'm Chris Edwards.
It's Thursday, the 15th of March, 2018.
On this week's show, we look at unconventional casting choices in comic book movies after the announcement of comedienne Kristen Wiig in Wonder Woman 2.
Plus, inspired by the team behind Juno and Young Adult reuniting for this year's Tully, we break down our favourite writer-director partnerships.
And as always, all our reviews and giveaways.
Let's get straight into it with Tomb Raider. In this reboot, we have Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. Her adventurer father, Richard, played by Dominic West, is missing, presumed dead, on a mission to find a tomb on a deadly and near-impenetrable island. After following a trail of clues her father left for her, Lara heads to the island with the help of Captain Lou Ren, played by Daniel Wu. However, an adversary of her father's, Matthias Vogel, played by Walton Goggins, is already on the island and willing to do anything to get at the tomb.
Hello, Sprout. If you're listening to this, then I must be dead. I found something, a tomb called the Mother of Death. If Trinity succeeds, our world is in danger. Promise me you will stop them.
I promise. I think I know where my dad went.
That's right in the middle of the Devil's Sea.
It'll be an adventure.
Death is not an adventure.
You shouldn't have come here. But I'm glad that you did.
What do you know about my father?
Now I see the likeness, the recklessness.
Close the tomb once and for all. The fate of humanity is now in your hands.
This all sounds like pretty interesting stuff, right? Mark my words, the latter portion is a worthy adventure film. But before we get there, we have to endure some really superfluous plot points and disturbingly bad dialogue. And this isn't just cheesy action dialogue. This is clunky, retch-inducing writing from Geneva Robertson-Dwarrett, who will also be partially responsible for the upcoming Captain Marvel, and Alastair Siddons. Neither of these two have a decent writing credit to their name, and just one feature film between the both of them that's been released to date. Definitely an odd choice for a reboot of a major franchise. The setup for Lara as a character is far, far too long for a character we're already familiar with, and when she's not being badass, she's just bland. On the upside, this rendition of Lara isn't a perfect soldier. She's crafted as a very flawed and very human daughter, bravely trying to find out what happened to her father. She suffers a great deal of injury, she makes mistakes, and when she kills people, boy oh boy do we feel her regret. But the script doesn't treat anybody particularly well. Dominic West comes off somewhere between a pathetic shell of a man and an escaped mental patient, while Walton Goggins' adversary is just a bad guy for the sake of being bad, without any real motivation. So, did we need another Tomb Raider? The negatives far outweigh the positives in this reboot, with a script and characterizations abysmal enough to make your eyes bleed. The modern Lara Croft is an improvement, but only marginally. This story needed a stronger team to bring the feisty female story to the big screen. 3 stars.
I'm sorry, but after all of that, how did you end up at 3 stars? I was expecting like 1 or half a star.
This is the thing. It does actually end up being a fairly decent adventure film, but it takes about an hour and a half to get to that place. You know, when they actually get inside the tomb of the title, you do actually get some interesting stuff going on, but it's getting to that point which just drags on forever. You know, these characters are not exactly the most intricate and fascinating characters. We don't need a big amount of setup. We get the idea that she's amazing, that she's very multi-talented. We get the idea that her father loves her but went off on a big adventure. And we get the idea that Vogel is the bad guy. Like, you don't need much more than that. But for some reason, they insist on an hour and a half setup to get to the point where they get inside the tomb. So that is the problem with
Does it take itself very seriously? Because the trailer made it look like it took itself very seriously.
It's not just the film that's taking itself seriously, and I do mention this in my written review. Alicia Vikander takes the character extremely seriously. This is a character which they should have a bit of fun with. There's so much room for potential, but she plays it so straight, so down the line. It's actually quite disappointing that everything is just so damn serious about this film. Like, it's a bit of fun. It's an action film.
Which in itself, it's always very strange when these kind of action adventure, like, you know, go in the jungle, find the treasure kind of films turn up, and they do take themselves as seriously as this one sounds like it does. When the best film of its kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, never takes itself seriously. I always find it funny that, you know, this is a ridiculous setup. Like, just listening to you describe the plot, I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck is this? I understand, like, in the video game context, this would work beautifully, but why not embrace the ridiculousness? I mean, Jess, when you were talking about the Jumanji sequel, that sounds like that's actually what it did and actually seemed to work because it embraced its stupidity.
Yeah, it did. It embraced its stupidity, and it also embraced its position in history, knowing that it was a sort of spin-off-y sequel thing, and the fact that its lead had passed away in the time that had come along. And yeah, I was really disappointed to hear Charlie say that they repeat her, essentially, like, her origins again for like the first hour of the film. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
They do set it up slightly differently. Like, she's now this, you know, hip young girl in London who's fending for herself and making her own way in the world and struggling to survive, which is hilariously ironic because her father is like a bajillionaire. But there is a bit of setup involved, but we just spend way too long figuring out who her character is, where that should be a no-brainer.
I'm starting to wonder, I mean, how much does going through extensive backstories of characters necessary? I mean, like, Indiana Jones, we don't get his backstory when he first walks in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we don't care. We don't know, nobody knows what the fuck Tintin's origin story is, but that kind of works to its advantage. How necessary is it to spend an hour and a half giving us the entire history and backstory of a character, or an entire film in some cases in regards to a lot of superhero films? Sometimes can't the character just be charismatic and exciting? And Alicia Vikander certainly has the chops to pull off that kind of character. I mean, she's done some phenomenal work. She seemed like a really good fit for this.
I don't know. She was always too little. She's always too little for me. She's so tiny. But does anyone else find it strange that this is obviously the first cinematic Lara Croft was Angelina Jolie and now Alicia Vikander? These are two women that have gone on to play Lara Croft, like, right after winning Best Supporting Actress Oscars. Like, you have an Oscar in your hand, and they've gone, and you know what I want to do with this now? Is play Lara Croft.
Very true.
You have a free pass to do anything you want, and they've decided to play Lara Croft. So weird.
What did Alicia Vikander win the Oscar for again, Daniel?
Don't, because if you say it, he will turn up and run his hand along silk.
Who'll turn up?
Terrible piano music.
Don't.
What was the film again? I just can't quite pick it. I know so many Oscar stats, but this one I seem to be blanking on.
Ex Machina. She won for Ex Machina.
Oh, I don't think so.
You're such a
I don't
bitch,
think
Chris.
that's
Or Testament of Youth. Or anything else.
Oh, I know. It was the Danish girl. Yes, the Danish girl.
Do you know he's directing an adaptation of his Dark Materials now for the BBC because there is no God?
I saw that and I just cackled. Although, isn't that the concept?
Take one of the most complex pieces of modern literature and hand it to the goldfish.
No, it's the goldfinch.
No, goldfish. Because a goldfish...
A bit of a literary humour for you.
A goldfish could write better than Tom Hooper. But, that's actually quite funny.
Yeah.
Yes. I win an Oscar, thus I must go run around in the jungle. I mean, why have this? I mean, why bring back Lara Croft?
Look, I reckon it embraces the female character a little bit more, and it does a little bit to push her as being a bit more human rather than just this kind of machine, which I feel like Angelina Jolie was. And I think it does a lot in terms of like putting her up against her male counterparts, but it's not enough to rationalize a reboot of this franchise. And I definitely say that it is going to be a franchise because when you get to the end of the film, no spoilers, but it's definitely setting itself up for a sequel. 100%. There is no question
it's going to be a franchise. Let's see how the weekend goes.
It's very presumptuous then.
Can I just point out another fun fact? Alicia's husband, the fabulous Michael Fassbender, also created a video game cinematic franchise with Assassin's Creed, which was also shit and set up to become a franchise, which would be so bad. It was like, we don't know where that's going to end up.
I believe it's dead. I believe it died.
It's 100% dead.
Well, if you're looking for some light entertainment, Tomb Raider may suffice. You can check it out in cinemas now, and my full review is at maketheswitch.com.au. Also out today is That's Not My Dog. Jess took in this Aussie comedy, so did it have you howling with laughter or whimpering in the corner?
Oh, man. It started with a simple idea. Gather Australia's best comedians and comedic performers, throw a barbecue, and have them tell their best pub jokes.
There was these 4 nuns, right?
This is a true story.
So this guy goes to the confessional.
There's this jumbo jet.
All right, I've got one for you.
This penguin decides to take himself for a drive.
Remember the guy who breaks into the Queen's bedroom years ago?
Absolutely nothing is happening.
Are there any questions?
This unexpected bolt of genius comes courtesy of Shane Jacobson, as an ode to his father, whom Jacobson claims is the funniest man he's ever known and a human joke jukebox. That's Not My Dog is one giant night down at your local comedy club, but with more beer, more Cadbury favourites, and a killer live soundtrack thanks to some of the best bands this country has to offer. That's Not My Dog earns every single one of my 4.5 stars, with even the bad jokes getting a thumbs up from me because the whole damn thing is such an awesomely good time. The only instance this film falters is the stage setup scenes, which I felt were unnecessary or could have been a little more organic, and the gross product placement. Other than that, prepare thyself, Australia, to yuck it up during That's Not My Dog's limited release this weekend.
I just want to know, was it Angela Lansbury or Meryl Streep who got you, and why are you the Manchurian Candidate? Because have you been brainwashed? What is this? Isn't this film actually good? What's happening? I'm
No, it is.
Like, I don't want to get on the stage if you're in the audience, if you know what I mean. Like, are you a sniper now, Jess? What's going on?
Yeah.
Russians.
Shush.
Yes?
All right, shut up, Chris. I'm going to answer your damn question. Sure. Okay. So I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that I'm a huge stand-up comedy fan. I go to it weekly, and last week when I saw this film, that was my dose. And I took my brother along with me, who was also a huge stand-up comedy fan, and I took my partner Sam, and we had the best night ever. It was genuinely a good time. The vibe that is created from this film with the music and the people and the laughs and the camaraderie is absolutely genuine, and it is really, really fabulous. And you sort of forget that you're just watching a film. You feel like you're down at the pub or you're down at the comedy club, and you're laughing along with all these familiar faces that feel so sort of homely to you all. And it is like, it's great. And Australia does comedy so well, and I think that this was the perfect and the best outlet for it.
No rebuttal.
Yeah, very good, solid argument, actually. Which sounds exactly like what we hoped it would be like when we talked about the trailer. I mean, the concept of the setup sounded a little bit unnecessary. From what you said in your review, it still sounds like it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, it's a really sweet idea. And when I went to see it, there was actually a Q&A with Shane Jacobson. So I got a better insight than most audiences would be afforded. But it's a really sweet concept that there's this guy and he loves his dad more than anything. And he sort of sat there and said, I've had a lifetime of laughs because of you, and I kind of want to repay it. It's just these scripted setup scenes are a bit stilted, and I feel like it just could have been more organic. I want to address also the elephant in the room. The title of It's Not My Dog does not get answered in the film. It is a very...
Please, yeah.
It is a very famous joke.
This is baffling to me.
If you Google it, you'll find it. It's been done 1.5 million times. It's not actually done in the film. It's just sort of like, it's just a title, which is, again, an homage to a famous joke. If people sit there going, why is it only on for 4 days at the cinema? I can't go see it this next weekend.
Shut up, Cheryl.
Yeah, Charlene. Okay, so this was also explained to me by Shane Jacobson, and it's actually a really good reason. If this film was to be played several times a day at multiple cinemas for weeks on end, you would eventually find an audience, on a Thursday afternoon at 2:00 with only 4 people in the cinema. And when you're watching live or essentially live comedy, that's not a good time. This needs to be, Shane Jacobson described it, a collective experience. You need to have a massive audience all laughing together, all sharing this good time to make it a successful experience and a successful film.
That's very astute.
Yes.
Actually, that's quite clever.
And he likened it, and I also quote it in my review. Like, if the Rolling Stones came to town and said, we're going to be playing every night for the next month, if you went there and there were only 5 people in the audience, that's not a good time.
No.
You need to see it with a whole bunch of people. So that's the concept behind this limited release. And I hope it's going to work. I think it's a really great idea. I loved this film. It's not just a great film, it's a great time. And if what Shane Jacobson indicated at the end of the screening, it may not be the last.
They might do it like Fantasia and continuously update it with new jokes.
Sure. Let's go with that. Fantasia, and That's Not My Dog.
It is Australia's Fantasia.
Jesus Christ.
Or they could just do a sequel,
Yeah, that.
That's Not My Dog 2000.
Can we mute him?
So anyway, That's Not My Dog! ! Is in cinemas from today until Sunday. So run, do not walk, and check out my full review at maketheswitch.com.au.
It's like Mother. It's like the 2018 ! Film.
It is.
That's not my dog. It's like Mother.
Who doesn't love a piece of punctuation in
Put
a title?
that on the
Daniel
poster.
Lavin.
It'll be collectively seen by about the same amount of people.
And exclamation points are where that comparison ends. Well, also out today is Human Flow. Daniel took this one in. So how did this artistic take on the refugee crisis affect you?
Around 65 million people are currently displaced around the world, forced to flee their home countries due to war, genocide, or natural catastrophe. It's the greatest displacement of people since the Second World War, and a crisis the developed world can't seem to find a solution to. With Human Flow, filmmaker and artist Ai Weiwei has attempted to document the refugee crisis and bring its very human tragedy into focus.
Being a refugee is much more than a political status. It is the most pervasive kind of cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. You are forcibly robbing this human being of all aspects that would make human life not just tolerable but meaningful in many ways.
The more immune you are to people's suffering, that's very, very dangerous. It's critical for us to maintain this humanity.
The officials came here and told them, look, there's no way you're going to get papers to continue. Either you go voluntarily or we arrest you.
It's going to be a big challenge to recognize that the world is shrinking and people from different religions, different cultures are going to have to learn to live with each other.
Shot over the course of a year in 23 countries, Human Flow is a powerful documentary, a visual tapestry capturing the scale of the crisis through stunning photography, both beautiful and devastating. Weiwei gives context to what we see through statistics and interviews with experts on the crisis, but it is the human connections he makes and the stories he captures that make Human Flow such an immediate and deeply moving experience. It's also a beautifully made and structured film, using everything from high-end digital cameras to drones to iPhones to show us the surreal sights of thousands dwarfed by vast natural landscapes searching for a new home. Uncompromising yet entirely accessible, Human Flow will likely stand as a significant document of this enormous international crisis, one that puts human faces to the overwhelming statistics and to educate its audience on who these lost and frightened people are. Beautiful and harrowing in equal measure, Human Flow is an important documentary that demands to be seen on the big screen. 4 stars.
I've been hearing about this film for a while now, and it's great that it's finally hitting cinemas because we have this great visual style, which I think in your article you mentioned Baraka as one of the films, which I love Baraka in terms of how it all kind of comes together visually, but also telling a story. You've got that side of it, but then you've also got the documentary part of this, which is obviously telling a story of something which is so imperative to the world right now and something that has has no resolution at this point. 65 million people. That is just huge. So yeah, you can imagine the visual scale for this must be immense.
It's a lot more accessible than a film like Baraka is. I mean, Baraka is one of those films, it's a great film, but it's a film for film buffs because of how much it demands your attention. I was a little worried that was what Human Flow was going to be, and it goes for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so it's quite a significant period of time to be devoted to the subject. So I went into it a little trepidatious because coming from a filmmaker who's also an artist and the trailer kind of giving the kind of Baraka feel. But the way that he approaches it is he wants it to be immediate. He wants to keep your attention at all times. And at no point did I ever think the film was too long. In my review, my written review, the only qualms that I had about the film was that I thought that its editing could have been a little sharper, only just not to make it shorter, but to kind of pick up the rhythm in it a little bit. But because it moves through these 23 different countries and it moves through so many different stories, and the way that it captures the refugee crisis is quite vast. It doesn't just focus on the Syrian refugee crisis of the Syrian refugees coming into Europe, but also covers Africa, a lot of areas in the Middle East, and even it goes to Mexico as well. It does a little moment on the wall, the impending doom of Trump's wall, and the refugee crisis of refugees trying to leave Mexico to get to the US. So because it moves so fast, it also has these interviews, so it breaks up the images. Wei Wei is a character in inverted commas within the film himself, so it's constantly changing perspective and giving you new information to digest so that it keeps you completely engaged with it. It feels like a film that is actively trying to do something, which is really exciting. And as much as you kind of walk out feeling a bit overwhelmed, it gives you a sense of hope. It doesn't give a solution to how the crisis can be solved, but it gives you a sense of it's important and needs to be solved. So you feel less crushed by it and more kind of empowered.
So Wei Wei is actually in Australia at the moment. There is a screening of Human Flow, which will be happening at the Opera House today, so the 15th of March, where I am sure he will be discussing a little bit about the Australian refugee situation as well. It's a Q&A for the Biennale Festival there, so I'm sure there will be a whole lot of discussion on the local events with that.
Well, you can find my full review at maketheswitch.com.au, and Human Flow is in cinemas now.
Also out today is Kangaroo, a documentary that looks at Australia's love-hate relationship with those unique animals.
The kangaroos are wonderful, fuzzy, they're maternal, and they're also a pest that should be eliminated wholesale.
I was shocked. The kangaroo is considered in Australia a pest. I thought it was like the American bald eagle, a national symbol.
Millions of kangaroos build up over the past few years to plague proportions.
Our sheep and cattle are competing directly with kangaroos for that pasture. At the moment, they are a pest.
It's the largest land-based slaughter of mammals.
They can't be farmed, so they have to be shot en masse in the wild. It can't be regulated.
It's cloaked in secrecy. We don't see the devastation.
It's a dirty secret.
Local extinction and regional extinction has happened.
If I hear a shot or I see a spotlight, I grab my camera. Someone has to witness it. Someone has to see what's happening.
If Australians really knew what happens out there in the dark, they would be horrified.
With stunning footage of kangaroos in the wild, this film provides audiences with an up-close experience of this incredible species and ignites a conversation on how to handle these marsupials, which are considered both pests and a national icon.
England Is Mine is also in limited release today. This biopic looks at Morrissey, the frontman of iconic band The Smiths, from his early working class roots as he dreams of being in a band, writing music and escaping the daily grind.
The local music scene is the sole preserve of troglodytes, whose regard for subtlety and variation is comparable to a pig's passion for the slaughterhouse. In case I haven't made myself clear, it wasn't very good.
Stephen Patrick Morrissey certainly likes the sound of his own voice.
Thank you.
If you spent as much time looking for a band as you do slagging them off, it could be you up there.
Excuse me, mate. We met before. I'm Billy.
Linda, this is Stephen.
You're not in a band or anything?
No, he's not yet. You?
Well, trying to get something together. Are you ready, mate?
Stephen, what are you waiting for? Take a chance.
What would you say if I told you we'd got ourselves a gig?
I'd say Billy get off the drugs.
Starring Jack Lowden as Morrissey and Jessica Brown Finlay as Linda Sterling, the film looks at the dedication and dreams of an icon of one of England's greatest alt-rock bands.
And in cinemas tomorrow for one night only is The Strangers, Pray at Night. A family embark on an ordinary holiday, but it soon becomes their worst nightmare. Upon arriving at a secluded caravan park, a knock on their trailer door leads to an inescapable night of terror as 3 masked strangers force this fractured family to come together and fight for their lives.
Is Tamara home?
I think you have the wrong trailer.
I thought we were all alone. What the hell?
Finally, National Theatre Live's Young Marx is in cinemas from this Saturday. Daniel took in this production, so how did it live up to the National Theatre's standards?
The life of Karl Marx might sound like a strange subject for a raucous, bawdy comedy, but that's exactly what's on offer with the latest National Theatre Live screening, Young Marx. Reuniting the creative team behind the smash hit One Man, Two Governors and featuring Rory Kinnear in the title role, the play looks at Marx as a young man living in Soho in 1850, writing Das Kapital and getting into trouble.
Looking for a thief.
Do you have a name?
Charles Marx.
She's packing again. She's not adapted at all well to abject poverty.
I'm not crying, Wolf. I'm going.
What's wrong with Russia wanting the book?
A book about capitalism. Russia's never had capitalism. There's more chance of a proletarian revolution starting in Windsor.
Unfortunately, Young Marx doesn't so much miss the mark, then crash and burn into it. This is a very stupid piece of theatre, embarrassingly unfunny, often juvenile, woefully directed by Nicholas Heitner, and completely at odds with the politics of the man it's trying to portray. There's hardly a moment that lands. The terrible script directed with no understanding of comic timing or rhythms, mostly yelled by its cast, forced to play cardboard cutouts of historical figures. Kinnear tries his best, but even an actor of his talent can't overcome how much of a git this play makes Marx out to be, and their claims at being historically accurate just sound like excuses for lazy theatre making. There's also something really strange about a piece of painfully dumb bourgeois theatre about the man who launched the most powerful attack on capitalism and the bourgeoisie, making this not only a bad production, but a clueless one. At nearly 3 hours, Young Marx is an ordeal. A beautifully captured ordeal on the part of NT Live, but an ordeal nonetheless. This had the capacity to be a sharp, witty, funny, and dangerous piece of theatrical anarchy, but instead feels like a shitty carry-on film on stage. Woefully made and woefully misguided. 2 stars.
Oh, this is sad. I saw One Man, Two Governors on the West End a couple of years ago and I loved it. So anything by these guys sounds like a winner, but apparently not. Apparently One Man, Two Governors was a fluke.
One Man, Two Governors is an adaptation of A Servant of Two Masters, which is a pre-existing classic comic text. But with Young Marx, you really feel like they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. I mean, there's one of the claims, because all the National Theatre Live screenings come with interviews with the director, with the production team, and short films about the making of the productions. And they keep talking about how one of the things they found when looking at Marx's life in 1850 in Soho was that all of this ridiculously funny stuff happens to him. And look, it is like the setups are really funny, and you can see that there's some kind of possibility of a really funny show in here. But it's just so bad. Stupid is the only word that I could think of, because the humor is crass and pointless. The representation of the female characters is really bad. It has no flow. It's incredibly episodic. And then it has these moments where it tries to be serious and it just kind of flops around on the floor like a dying fish. There was just so much about the show that I watched and went, I don't understand what the fuck is happening. Like, what are you doing? There's this moment where, like, the worst moment of the whole thing is there's this moment where Marx goes to one of the reading rooms at the Natural History Museum, and he walks in the room and there's a guy sitting there, and I turned to the friend next to me and went, fuck, that's Charles Darwin. they've got fucking Charles Darwin in this. So, of course, he and Charles Darwin have a conversation. And at one point, Charles Darwin is talking about what will eventually be what his work on evolution. And Marx drops this phrase, on the origin of species, and the whole audience goes, and I was like, please kill me. What the fuck is happening? Anyway, there's this terrible fight sequence at the end of it. Charles Darwin does a magic trick.
He's
For
a
no
very
reason!
talented man.
He makes a rabbit appear for no reason! It's just, it was basically everything wrong with what that kind of style of theatre can be. Yeah, I hated it.
Would you like to rescore it from your 2 stars?
I totally didn't get that gist.
I'm sure all of my neighbors are now like, why is that fucking gay idiot screaming again?
What do you mean your neighbors? What about our podcast listeners?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Like, they're used to it. They're more used to it by now. They're like, they listen to the introduction at the beginning of the episode and go, like, oh, I'm Charlie. I'm Jess. I'm Daniel. Oh, fuck, Daniel. Fuck, where's Brent? Where's Brent's jokes and Jake's deep dulcet tones? But it's okay because Chris comes in and then it's all fine.
This is taking a sharp turn. What's happening? What's going on?
Self-loathing because I've had to relive the experience of Young Marx right now whilst telling it to you guys. If you want to live it yourself, National Theatre Live screenings of Young Marx are in cinemas from this Saturday, and you can check out my full review, which is probably a little bit more entertaining and a fuckload shorter at maketheswitch.com.au.
All right, now let's check out the upcoming films in our trailer wrap. Here's the teaser trailer for Mary Poppins Returns.
Mary Poppins, it is wonderful to see you.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Now, as far as a teaser goes, I think this is a pretty solid teaser. I mean, it's playing with like the iconography that the audience recognizes. It's surprisingly a lot more classical than I expected. It doesn't feel like it's pandering quite as much as I thought it would. I mean, there's lots of things to be excited about with this film. Emily Blunt looks like she's got the character of Mary Poppins in the bag.
Looks and sounds.
Yeah, Lin-Manuel Miranda. We love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I mean, it is directed by Rob Marshall, who directed Chicago, the greatest musical film of all time.
Yep. What?
But also, yes, I think the greatest musical film of all time. But also directed...
I don't know if we can continue this conversation. Daniel just had a stroke mid-recording. Someone call 911. Someone needs to go to Daniel's house and save him because he's dying. Something's gone wrong.
But he also directed, that's a word, Into the Woods, which was not great by any standards. 9 is fascinating. We'll talk about 9 a bit later, actually. I will bring that up at some point. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those trepidatious projects. But as far as this teaser is concerned, I'm like, okay, like I'm a little bit more excited about it than I was, put it that way.
And I mean, let's have a look at the cast. On top of Emily Blunt, we have Meryl Streep, which I'm sure one of the members on the podcast is excited about.
It's too late at night for you to say the phrase on top, the cast on top of her. Like piled on top of her, like fireworks.
Yes. Yes, in this order. So
didn't even take it dirty. Daniel, what's wrong with you?
Has Mary Poppins become a cheerleader?
So Emily Blunt is on the bottom, then Meryl Streep is on top of her. No, okay.
I mean, we always knew Meryl Streep was at top.
We have Meryl Streep, we have Angela Lansbury, we have Ben Whishaw, we have Julie Walters, and also...
Colin Firth.
Yes, there's Colin Firth. And we're also seeing Dick Van Dyke back in this in a role.
He's still alive?
Yes. I know.
At least he's not playing the same character anymore, we think. Disney.
I just think it's kind of a hostile move. I think Rob Marshall's personally attacking me because he's put Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ben Whishaw in the same film and then put in Meryl Streep as a cameo. I think I might die.
I think you might actually enjoy this Rob Marshall film.
I might actually... I do actually enjoy Rob Marshall films.
Oh my God. Is it because Ben Whishaw is Paddington?
No, it's because Ben Whishaw is fucking beautiful and is my future husband, even though he has a husband.
It's because it's Paddington, right? I'm going with the Paddington thing.
He's pretty gorgeous. He's gorgeous.
No, this love existed before Paddington.
I'm pretty sure it's a Paddington.
Before Cloud Atlas even. And then Cloud Atlas made it just so much more intense.
Nah. Chris, you're secretly a plushie, and it's all about the Paddington thing.
You got me.
The music is written by Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, who were the composers. I think Mark Shaman was definitely one of the composers on Hairspray, but I think also Scott Whitman was one of the composers on Hairspray. So that at least
like musical theatre duo. Also did Smash.
Oh damn it! I'm not even going there. I opened the doors and you came in.
Daniel, stop! Just let me be your star. Come on.
Even from this teaser trailer, it does look like it's going to be drawing very heavily on the nostalgia factor. Like, it knows the fact that we all love and cherish Mary Poppins as a childhood classic.
And
so
under no circumstances are you allowed to
definitely
fuck
playing
this
up that point.
up.
Oh, yeah.
But to counter that, the one advantage with coming back to Mary Poppins, which is why I didn't think it was the worst idea in the world, is that there are a lot of Mary Poppins books. Like, there's actually a lot of material to pull from. So the possibility is that this is not just going to be, I mean, yes, but what the fuck else isn't nostalgia bait anymore? But at least with this one, there is material that they can pull from to continue to build this new cinematic universe, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And the fact that it's set in the Depression means that maybe it will continue what the original Mary Poppins did, was at least having some sort of idea of the social climate of the world that the story is happening in, like the suffragette movement in the first film.
And feed the birds, Daniel. Tuppence a bag.
Oh, wow. Yes, I'm sure she's probably still alive.
Homelessness. Yes. Homelessness.
Yes. Anyway, yes, Mary Poppins. She returns. When does she return, Charlie?
Well, I believe she'll be returning for Australian audiences on the 1st of January 2019. What a way to bring in the new year.
Not soon enough.
All right, now let's take a look at the trailer for Tully.
Do you know what a night nanny is? They take care of the baby at night so mom and dad can get some sleep.
I don't want a stranger in my house. It's like a Lifetime movie where the nanny tries to kill the family and the mom survives and she has to walk with a cane at the end.
Get over yourself.
Hello. I'm Tully. I'm here to take care of you. I'm just not used to people doing things for me. I hold a baby all day, and then nighttime rolls around and I'm supposed to just switch gears, like, hello, all sexy now. You're empty. Yeah. No, you're empty on this side. Your 20s are great, but then your 30s come around the corner like a garbage truck at 5 a.m. Girls kill. No, we don't. We might look like we're all better, but if you look close, we're covered in concealer. You're convinced that you're this failure, but you actually made your biggest dream come true.
If you want to run off or something, I get that. Because I want to do that too sometimes, but I'm not gonna.
I'm here to help you with everything. You can't fix the parts without treating the whole. Yeah, no one's treated my whole in a really long time.
I mean, first of all, this is just a really fucking well-edited trailer. The use of music and the way that they've smashed everything together to really get you inside of the character's mindset is fantastic. But also, this just looks so good. I'm so excited for Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody to work together again. They were just
Charlize Theron.
And Charlize Theron.
Like,
yeah. Like, Charlize Theron is a fuck-off great actress, and one of the best roles she's been given in her career was in Young Adult, thanks to those two people. So it's just really exciting to see her get to tackle an actually meaty role again.
Also, Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody, they both kind of need a win. They haven't had one for quite a while. Diablo Cody won an Oscar for Juno, and Jason Reitman is a great filmmaker, but they haven't been of late. And I feel like this collaboration might be because both of them have sat there and gone, we need a win.
Looking at his list of credits for the last few years, actually Young Adult's probably the last really strong film that he made.
And that was 2011. It was a while ago.
Yeah. But he, like, some of the films, like Up in the Air is a fucking spectacular film. So we know that he has the capacity to be a really, really exciting and great director. And yeah, the strongest collaboration he's had with anybody has been with Diablo Cody. I mean, I prefer Young Adult to Juno, but Young Adult is a really great film. So, yeah. And you're right, Chris. This is a great trailer. Like, it really grabs you.
Also, playing the titular role is Mackenzie Davis, who seems
we love Mackenzie.
And she seems to be, the gal of the moment. You know, she's obviously in Tully. She was in, Blade Runner 2049, and in one of the best episodes of Black Mirror. She was in The Martian, and she's really coming. Oh God, I've just seen on IMDb she's going to be in the Terminator reboot. Fuck. Okay,
yeah, that was just announced the other day.
Yes, but she's a terrific actress and she's really coming into her own, and I'm excited to see more from her.
She's just got one of those faces that when she appears in a film, she just radiates the most beautiful energy. Yeah. But just because of how wonderfully talented she is. So I didn't know that she was in this film until she jumped in the trailer, and then I think I literally went, "Oh, it's Mackenzie Davis!" Oh.
But also, Charlize Theron, this looks like a great role for her. Like, in this trailer, one of my favorite moments is actually where she's sitting at the table and she's got her stomach out and her daughter says, "Mom, what's wrong with your body?"
That is the best moment of the whole trailer.
But it's clearly going to be a bit of a comment on the role of females in the family and in the workplace and in society at the moment. So that's what kind of Diablo Cody does best, I feel, like that kind of commentary. So it'll be really interesting to see where that goes.
I just love how Charlize Theron just like every few years just does one film. Like she just kind of, simmers for a bit and does one film and she goes, "That's right, I'm fucking Charlize Theron. I'm fucking amazing." Just kicks you in the face and then walks out.
Is that how you felt after the Fate of the Furious?
I didn't watch that. I'm more thinking about things like Mad Max or, Atomic Blonde or,
Huntsman with
Young Adult.
Another movie coming out this year called Gringo.
Or Arrested Development, which I still think is the greatest performance she's ever given. Ever.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
Mr. X.
F. It's Mr. F. More British eyes only.
But yeah, I'm really excited for this film. Even in his worst entries in his filmography, Jason Reitman has a great way with performers, and Charlize Theron is a great performer. And when she's given great dialogue, like she is by Diablo Cody, it's a really exciting time. So, just snaps for these guys. I'm pumped. Let's do it.
Well, Chris, maybe because you're so into this collaboration, maybe we should talk a little bit more about it later in the show.
That sounds super fucking dumb. I don't like it now.
Well, tough shit we're going to. So. Well, for those who are also excited, Tully is out in Australian cinemas from the 10th of May. All right, finally, let's take a look at The Grinch.
Today, we will do mean things, and we will do them in style. Oh, hello. Happy holidays. What's this?
Excuse me, are you getting that?
No.
Ugh, why won't those fucking minions fucking die? Okay, so it seems that Illumination have found...
No, they have to take up 3/4 of a trailer of a film they're not in.
I know, it seems that Illumination have found their cash cow in the Minions, and now they're putting them in every film they make. The voice of the Grinch is Benedict Cumberbatch, who is my love, my future husband, my happy place.
Hasn't he kind of been a bit dull lately?
And in this trailer, it is
like
not
really
good.
peak with Sherlock. Has he done anything since then that's been actually
normally when I
impressive?
see...
I'm not sure. That's why I'm whispering, because he's got such a big face and head that I feel like he can hear me and speak at normal volumes. That's just quietly...
Those telescopic ears.
Benedict Cumberbatch really hasn't lived up to
Chris, let Jess talk. Let Jess talk.
Sorry, this is the first time that I have that I've seen or heard Benedict Cumberbatch batch and haven't wanted to go off and pleasure myself afterwards.
Chris, interrupt her. Chris, interrupt her.
It's a children's film, Jessica.
I know,
it's a children's film.
I know, but this looks so bad and stupid. And that Pharrell Williams song, oh my God, make it go away.
You know there's a problem
when die.
What is this thing that's happening where trailers are using other films that are unrelated to this film at all to sell this film?
That's my biggest fear, that this is actually going to turn out to be a Minions sequel, because that's exactly what the world wants.
No, it's just a Despicable Me movie. Like, really, look at it. It's a Despicable Me movie. It's all the same setups. It's the same character at the middle. They already made 3 Grinch movies. They just called it Despicable Me and had Steve Carell do a dumb fucking Russian accent.
This one's just set at Christmas time. That's the only difference.
Yeah, at the end of the movie, the Grinch is going to rip off his green fur and it's going to be Gru underneath the whole time.
Yeah, and the dog will be a fucking minion.
You know what? I think Chris is actually onto something. I think that Despicable Me is actually the Grinch story in disguise, not a very good disguise. Because what I was thinking when I was watching this trailer is, inevitably, the Grinch is going to go through the whole process of coming around to Christmas and being a happy person, because that's basically, you know, how these fairy tale stories end. And that's, yeah, it's exactly how the whole Despicable Me plot plays out. I just having this realization that that's what's going to happen. My God.
Occasionally, I'm very fucking astute.
I know, once every few years, but yeah.
And Charlie has a lot of trouble dealing with that when it happens.
It's blowing my mind. You have no idea.
The last one was in 2014, and here it is again, and it's been used on The Grinch. So... Well, there it is.
Well, for those of you who hate Christmas and are looking forward to The Grinch, it's hitting Australian cinemas on the 29th of November. Nice and early, but not quite early enough to beat the Christmas decorations in stores. And to check out all those trailers and more, head to youtube.com/MakeTheSwitchAU.
This week, the internet exploded with news that funny girl Kristen Wiig has joined the Wonder Woman 2 cast as its villain, Cheetah. Keyboard warriors/geeks had their claws out, objecting to this casting choice with extreme prejudice. However, this is not the first time, nor will it be the last, that fans have been none too happy about those slipping into their favourite characters, only for them to surprise us all and rule the day. I'm going to start with the one who I feel is the biggest one of all, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He's been playing Iron Man for the last decade. At the end of this year, he would have played Stark/Iron Man 9 times. When the first film came out in 2008, Robert Downey Jr. was 43 years old. Only 5 years earlier, he was uninsurable by any studio due to his past of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, weapons charges, etc., etc. His wife had left him. He was an absolute and utter mess of a human being. But he turned it around. And although at the time we didn't know the grand Marvel picture, but when you think about it
Including
now...
Marvel, they didn't know it either.
Yeah, but when you think about it now, look back, think of it like where we are now with Marvel and where we were back then. All of this was resting on the shoulders of a 43-year-old former drug addict and convicted criminal, essentially. And it's insane. And a lot of people sort of had written him off beforehand. He'd done, like in the couple years leading up to Iron Man, he'd done some really great roles, but they were sort of a bit under the radar. And since then, he's absolutely dominated. He's been nominated for an Academy Award with Tropic Thunder. He's made some comedies, another franchise in Sherlock Holmes, and obviously the leader of the MCU. So, yeah.
But I mean, there's not... Well, I was sitting here thinking, you know, what are other examples of moments where, you know, famous actors are announced cast as big characters in superhero films? And I actually think almost every single fucking actor I've ever heard announced attached to a superhero film has actually been like scrutinized right back through to like Christopher Reeve in Superman and Michael Keaton in Batman. And, you know, it's like as soon as someone gets announced to play these characters, they're kind of fucked until the film opens. Everyone thought Christian Bale was the last choice on earth to ever play Batman. But it's funny. I'm surprised at the idea of there being people paying scrutiny about the idea of Kristen Wiig. It's like, Kristen Wiig.
She's awesome.
Working in the Wonder Woman universe with Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot. like, doesn't that just sound awesome?
Yes, and
but
hopefully she'll bring some much needed humor to that, because the DC films are always a lot darker than the Marvel ones, and hopefully she'll bring some humor to it.
Some actual humor as opposed to the humor they attempted with that Justice League film.
Yes.
She's not unfamiliar with serious roles either. Like, she's played some really interesting characters in her time, and they're not all comedies. So yeah, it's surprising that there has been kind of that backlash. But yeah, I mean, as Daniel says, there's so many instances where people have been cast in these particular roles and they've just been lashed out at. One of the ones which strikes me as being one of the biggest ones was actually one Daniel mentioned, the Michael Keaton, when he was cast as Batman, because there was so much outrage then. I mean, it was in a time, the late 80s, where you had stars like Stallone and Schwarzenegger starring in films, and then to suggest that someone like Michael Keaton should play Batman was just ludicrous. In an age where there was really no internet, 50,000 people wrote to Warner Brothers to complain, to say that they did not think he would be appropriate. That's just insanity that they would bother to write letters.
You know, they think Michael Keaton and they automatically think Batman. But back in the day, those who saw it, Michael Keaton was actually started out as a stand-up comedian. So that's what people...
He was Beetlejuice to people.
Yeah, so that's what people saw back then.
Yeah, he went into Beetlejuice and he went into Mr.
But then
Mom.
the thing is, you can almost say the same thing has happened with literally every single man who has been cast as Batman.
Actually, every single human being that's ever been cast in a Batman for anything, like really.
Yeah.
All but one... Batfleck has proven us wrong. I mean, anyone who does get cast in these roles, they're screwed from the beginning until, like you said before, until the film comes out, because they have this fandom behind it, these comic book nerds and geeks and people who've been devouring these books since they were kids and have this image in their head. And then all of a
stuff
sudden
that
they've
means a
been
lot
tagged
to
a film.
them as well. Like, as much as, like, you know, it does mean a lot to them.
Yeah, it does. So they're never going to be perfect. And then every actor brings their own flavor to each character, and then they come out into the cinema and they either get ripped to shreds or they get embraced and turned into tattoos and what have you, and cosplay and, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's one of those damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of situations. You're never going to make all the people happy all the time.
Well, we believe in you, Kristen Wiig. We believe in you,
do.
Patty Jenkins. We believe that you're going to do something great. I mean, it's just such a fucking cool piece
Switch
of casting.
stands
Like,
behind
great.
Kristen Wiig.
We stand behind you, Kristen Wiig.
Always. Literally always.
Especially in Mother.
Oh my God, especially in Mother. Oh.
Yeah. Let's talk about Mother, guys. Let's spend another half an hour talking about Mother.
Instead of talking about Mother, let's move on.
Who directed Mother again?
Darren Aronofsky.
Sorry, one more time?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Darren Aronofsky.
Darren Aronofsky?
Darren Aronofsky.
After all that talk about Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody reuniting for Tully, here we go, kids. It is actually happening. Boy, oh boy, am I getting excited about a good old-fashioned writer-director partnership. I would list some examples of my favourites, but I don't want to give away my picks. So, what do you guys think? Charlie, you, what do you think? Any, like,
you there, in the
often
corner.
collaborating screenwriters and directors that really take your fancy?
I had a couple of interesting examples for sure. Spielberg, on one of his, personally, what I think is one of his greatest films, E.T., collaborated with the writer Melissa Matheson, and then reunited with her in 2016 for the BFG.
One of his worst films.
Unfortunately, not one of the greater ones. She had actually passed away by that stage, sadly, but it was interesting that there was a collaboration almost 30 years apart. So yeah, that's a really nice example. Hitchcock was known for collaborating with John Michael Hayes. They worked together on Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, The Man Who Knew Too Much. So that was a really interesting collaboration.
Yeah, that's one of the few instances where he did actually work with a writer more than once, because most of the time, I mean, he worked with great writers like Joseph Stefano and Psycho and Ernest Lehman on North by Northwest, but I don't think he worked with many people more than once. So
I think you're right.
That is actually quite unusual within his filmography.
My partnership is most certainly not the best. In fact, they're quite possibly the worst writer-director partnership in history.
Oh, this should be
Is this the writer and director of William and Kate?
Oh, I wish. No, these two men, of course they're going to be men. Let's just say that they have they're sort of like the impact culturally at the time, the very 90s. I'm going to screw up the pronunciations of the names, by the way. So Paul Verhoeven and Joe Esterhaas are responsible for Showgirls and Basic Instinct. which are two of the most disgustingly misogynistic and gratuitous films ever to hit the big screen, and they're fantastic. They are absolutely and utterly revolting films and horrific guilty pleasures, but they are fun. They're very indicative of the time, and you look at them now and you just shake your head and go, oh dear Lord, what were we thinking? But yes, they made those two gems, Showgirls and Basic Instinct.
Well, that was super unexpected, Jess.
Thank you.
Yeah, like...
Come on, Daniel, class it up a bit. What have you got?
Well, I mean, really, I just want to take a leaf out of Lady Bird's book and go a Paul Thomas Anderson and himself. But, because really...
That would definitely not count.
I have to be honest. I've sat here for a good 2 hours trying to think of more than one, and I actually can't think of many. Like, I think of many partnerships where one film works, like, you know, David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin on The Social Network, or, you know, films like that. The one I did think of was another Spielberg collaborator. I really loved the films he's done with Tony Kushner.
Yes, that's what I was going to pick. One of them.
Lincoln is great. Like, I really like Lincoln, but Munich is fucking spectacular. And it's a great combination of the quick, sharp tone of Kushner's dialogue and intellect combined with the scope of Spielberg's vision. Works really nicely together. And as far as I know, they are going to do another film together. They do want to...
Yeah, they are. Do you know what it is?
No, I actually don't remember what it is. Which one is it?
It's his remake of West Side Story.
That's right.
He's looking for cast
Spielberg
at the
is
moment.
going to do West Side Story? What?
Yeah, at the moment.
Yes.
But there are rumors he's also just done a secret table read of a film about the life of Leonard Bernstein, who composed West Side Story. So no one knows what the fuck he's doing right now.
But is he going to do it as a musical?
Yeah, they want to do it as he's wanted to do a musical his whole life, and he's always wanted to remake West Side Story.
So Tony Kushner is working on reworking the book, and Steven Spielberg has always wanted to do West Side Story and always wanted to do a musical, and I'm surprisingly intrigued.
Yep, I'm there for that.
There you go.
So Chris, can I push you to actually give us yours? I know you said you didn't want to, but I'd like to know.
I'd love to. Well, actually, I feel a bit sheepish in that I actually didn't think of Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, and I think they're two, like, arguably one of the best instances of this, because ever since they've collaborated, I think each of them have grown as artists. I think Frances Ha is, for each of their careers, one of their best films, and Mistress America is great, and for each of them after that, they've developed in interesting ways and both become more humanist and really interesting and taken on interesting subjects, and I think that's just wonderful.
And Greta Gerwig has outgrown Noah Baumbach now.
Like, yeah. And I'm pretty fucking happy about it. But my main pick that I had thought of, coming off the back of the very recent Academy Awards, and where finally James Ivory was able to win an Oscar for screenwriting, even though he collaborated throughout the 80s and 90s with, I'm going to butcher her name and I'm going to feel really bad about it, Ruth Javala. I'm so sorry, Ruth. But she was the writer of A Room with a View, Howard's End, and The Remains of the Day, each of which were directed by James Ivory and produced by Ishmael Merchant, and kind of gave birth to the Merchant Ivory trend in the 90s. But those films are really magnificent and really wonderful in the way that they adapt classic British novels and make them relevant and make them kind of sing on screen. And it really changed film. Like, they really had a huge impact on the film industry and film as an art form, to get real for a second. So, you know, writers, directors, working together on a frequent basis. I'm about it. I'm into it. Keep it up, kids.
This message has been approved by Chris.
Why am I allowed to speak?
Filler.
Okay. There we go.
Savage bitch.
Shut up, I'm speaking. Okay. We have some great giveaways up for grabs this week. First up, you could win one of 5 copies of Catastrophe Season 3, starring Rob Delaney and Sharon Horgan as a dysfunctional couple thrown together by an unexpected pregnancy and abrupt parenthood. It's called a condom, people. They attempt to weather unemployment, mortgages, children who bite, Brexit, jealous co-workers, drunken mistakes, friends in rehab, disastrous job interviews, insane family, and of course, keeping the children alive.
We also have 5 copies of The Handmaid's Tale Season 1 up for grabs. The series, based on Margaret Atwood's masterpiece, is set in the dystopia of Gilead, a society ruled by a twisted fundamentalism in its militarized return to traditional values. As one of the few remaining fertile women, Offred, played by Elizabeth Moss, belongs to a caste of women forced into sexual servitude as a last desperate attempt to repopulate. She struggles to survive and find the daughter who was taken from her. To win this and all our great prizes, head to maketheswitch.com.au/comps now.
And before we go, we'd like to offer you some cinematic inspiration, with each of us suggesting one film that you should see this week and why. For me, I'm going to go back to a film that Daniel and I saw together.
The early formative days of our friendship.
Yes, we were in pantomimes together, going off Daniel's gasp there. It was in the early days of Switch, though, and it was actually a day that we saw quite a few films together. It was coming into Boxing Day season, so we were seeing a lot of different films. This one in particular definitely caught my...
This might end our friendship.
No, I don't think it will. No, it definitely won't.
Because I remember that day, and I know there was one film that I fucking hated, and I hope you're not going to say that one.
No, I think we were both in agreement on what we liked and what we hated on that day. No, this one is 2011's The Skin I Live In.
Oh, yes, bitch, yes.
Exactly. Pedro Almodovar at his darkest. It is... just this delicious story about a guy. He's a plastic surgeon, and he basically kidnaps this woman and ends up turning her slowly into his deceased wife. It sounds disturbing, and it is disturbing.
So much more than what that description gives, because even that description in itself is completely incorrect, but you can't say why. Yeah, the perfect description of the film, but there's the wonderful point where you realize, that's not what this film is about.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to see this film. Well, for one, it's such a beautifully shot film for something that is largely in quite a sterile conditions. Like, it's really stunningly shot. It has an amazing performance from Antonio Banderas in it. Like, he is just the creepiest person. It's disturbing in a way that I find a lot of films are not, and that's maybe from my fear of sharp implements and things like that, but still, yeah, The Skin I Live In is a fantastic film, and it's definitely one that I recommend you hunt down and watch.
And not that hard to hunt down, because it is available on Netflix, because I recently rewatched it, and I can confirm it holds the hell up. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, that's great news. Yeah. Okay. Easy then. Like, you don't even have to find it on Blu-ray, which it is in impeccable form. It's right there on Netflix for you. So go and check it out.
If my friend Nick is listening, give me my fucking copy of The Skin I Live In back on Blu-ray, because I lent it to you like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh my God. Drag him. Yes. That, Nick. Fuck you, Nick.
All right, Jess, it's your turn. What is your recommendation for the week going to be?
Okay, I'm going to be a bit somber this week. My recommendation, I know.
Because The Skin I Live In was such a laugh-a-minute film.
Is it Showgirl?
Shut up. No, I'm not Brent. No, my recommendation is based on this last weekend would have been Anton Yelchin's 29th birthday, who I think is one of those brilliant and one of my most favorite young actors of all time. So I'm recommending what I think is his finest. It was from 2011 and it's called Like Crazy. This film stars Anton Yelchin and Felicity Jones, who most people will know from Rogue One and The Theory of Everything. This whole film was ad-libbed, which I think is an important thing to note. And it's about a young American boy who meets a girl at university who is British. And once they graduate, she stays her student visa. And as a result, she's unable to enter the United States again. So it becomes a film that follows these two people over the years as they struggle to keep their relationship alive while living in two different countries, and how distance affects them and how they have to establish new lives in their respective countries while still trying to maintain their love and affection and passion for one another, and they meet new people and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it is ad-libbed. It's based on the director's real life. Felicity Jones was cast like 2 days before they started shooting, which I think is even more remarkable when you see the chemistry between these two actors. When I first saw this film, it destroyed me absolutely and wholeheartedly emotionally, more than any other film has ever affected me this much before or since. And I think it is a remarkable film. I think it is an incredible film for these two young performers. And I cannot recommend enough if you want a masterclass in acting or even filmmaking like Crazy from 2011.
All right, Daniel, it's your turn. Jess and I have both selected films from 2011. When in cinema's history is your film from this week?
No, mine is not from 2011. No. Though earlier in the podcast, we did vaguely mention Rob Marshall's film 9.
This is where it's coming in.
I'm not going to recommend 9, but I am going to recommend the film that 9 is actually based on, which is Federico Fellini's 1963 masterpiece, 8½. The reason why this is in my head is that weirdly, when I have a night where I can't sleep, I'll lie there looking at the TV going, what will I put on? And 8.5 times out of 10, I'll put this film on.
Daniel.
Basically, the story is, it's about a film director, Guido Anselmi, who is a very famous Italian film director, and he's about to make his big, epic, great film, and he's got writer's block. And he cannot for the fucking life of him work out what to make this fucking film about. And it's basically him trying to work out a way of getting around his writer's block, but the way he does that is to indulge in all of the great indulgences in his life. It's played by Marcello Mastroianni in one of his most famous roles. He's basically a giant man-child, and it's one of... I think maybe it is the greatest film on the filmmaking process ever made. It's tremendously funny. It's tremendously imaginative. It plays a lot with the themes of magic and circus themes that pop up a lot in Fellini's films. It's just an endlessly wonderful film, and I absolutely adore it. For a film buff, 8.5 is like required viewing.
I have to agree with you, Daniel. It is definitely a good choice. And Chris, you're wrapping up the podcast today. What is your pick for this week?
I have to disappoint you, Charlie, because I know how much you love it when I cheat. But I'm actually picking a film.
Whoa.
I've heard that occasionally I cheat during this segment, but this time I'm actually not.
And other segments. I wouldn't just limit it to this segment.
I apologize so much, Charlie. But no, I'm going to pick something that I actually just rewatched today in advance of, I don't know, maybe a particular feature that might be coming to the website at some point very soon. Maybe, I don't know, in the next week or two. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm going to pick Bridge of Spies, Steven Spielberg's film from 2015. Hugely underrated film, I would say, because it is actually genuinely great. It's Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance in his Oscar-winning role. Set during the Cold War as a Russian spy is captured by the Americans, only for then 2 Americans to be captured by the Russians and the East Germans at the time. And a trade has to be negotiated by Tom Hanks as an insurance lawyer in the States. But it's this wonderful story of a decent man trying to be decent in the world, which is this wonderful phase of Tom Hanks's career that he's in at the moment, and for some reason isn't getting as much recognition as he was earlier in his career. But now with this and Sully and Captain Phillips and The Post, he's really hitting this sweet spot of America's dad, who's the last bastion of moral decency and doing good in the world. And it's really well done here. I think it's a really good performance from him, and it's got a genuinely fantastic performance from Mark Rylance, who makes me less and less mad every time I watch it that he beat Sylvester Stallone for his equally great performance in Creed in the same year.
I mean, we're still mad, but it's fine.
Still mad. Honestly, I'm still mad. But yeah, Bridge of Spies holds up. It's really great, and I don't think enough people give it credit for that. There you go.
Well, that was a pretty fantastic collection of films this week, and you can find the links to all the articles we talked about on this week's podcast at maketheswitch.com.au. Please subscribe to SWITCHCast on iTunes or your favourite podcast platform, and don't forget to rate us. And stay in touch on Twitter. I'm at Charlie_David. Jess.
At Miss Jess_Switch.
Daniel.
At Daniel Lamon.
And Chris.
At Chris C. Edwards.
Like it, follow it. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Make the Switch AU to stay up to date with all the latest reviews, news, trailers, and giveaways.
And you can find all the notes and links to everything we've discussed on this week's podcast, as well as other episodes, by visiting switchcast.com.au.
On next week's show, I'll have my verdict on Peter Rabbit as it hops into cinemas just in time for the school holidays.
I'll take a look at the film that aims to shine a new light on one of history's most misunderstood women, Mary Magdalene.
And Brent will battle his own personal monsters when he takes on Pacific Rim Uprising. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you all next week.